with us today. My name is Stacey, and before we get started, I'd like to go over a few items so you know how to participate in today's event. Firstly, if you have any questions at any point during the webinar, please feel free to type them in the Q&A box in your control panel. Otherwise, you could also ask us live as you'll be unmuted during the Q&A session. The presentation will be recorded, and the audio, video, and all the relevant links will all be available on IT Connection website and will also be sent to you. Now, without further ado, I would like to introduce to our presenters today, Greg Hill as the Managing Director at TransformUp Consulting and Vincent Pang as the Director at IT Connection. I will now hand it over to Vincent to introduce Greg.
Thanks very much, Desi.
No worries.
Firstly, I'd like to welcome everyone attending today's webinar and introduce our guest speaker, Greg Hill from TransformUp Consulting. So Greg has 25 years experience within the technology sector, working across a range of industries such as FMCG, manufacturing, warehousing, logistics, retail, and higher education. Greg has a deep experience in business applications, including enterprise resource planning, which is ERP systems, and supporting operational solutions. With his experience in earlier finance roles, Greg works closely with business executives to help deliver strategies through the use and optimization of business systems. He's particularly interested with the opportunities that business can leverage when transforming to cloud platforms, including benefits that automation tools can offer. Recently, Greg started his own consulting firm, working with clients in both private and public sectors, and more recently, a number of NFP organizations to help them realize the benefits and opportunities when transforming to next generation systems and the process to replace legacy applications. Greg is a regular contributor and presenter within the ERP community at key user groups around Australia and New Zealand, and he delivers industry-based lectures to higher education students, presenting the lessons he's learned working in businesses on the leading edge of cloud technologies. Not only is Greg passionate about technologies that are available to businesses today, he focuses on the human side of these transformational programs, along with the ever-increasing challenge of improving adoption and the overall user experience. So that brings us to the topic of today's webinar, which is demystifying the cloud, understanding what it means to consider a digital transformation journey. Greg has been involved with many digital transformations focused on cloud enablement. He's moved core businesses to either as a service offering, or he's led projects aimed at uplifting IT resources to be hosted on cloud. Greg today will give you a frank and honest account of what cloud means to your business and what challenges lie ahead if you choose to go down this path. The presentation will also focus on things he might have done differently and some lessons learned in a way that's relevant to all industries and functional areas. So a very warm welcome to Greg, and hand it over to you.
Thank you very much, Vincent. Thanks for that introduction. Good morning or afternoon or evening, wherever you are in the world. Welcome to the presentation. And as Vincent mentioned in the introduction, I just want to use today to try and explain what it might mean to transform your business. So transformation is a word that's thrown around a lot these days, and I think it's important to understand exactly what's involved in these transformation programs if you're actually about to undertake one or you're thinking about it. It could be as simply upgrading or moving a lot of your applications to cloud. It might be involving going to software as a service applications. And it gives or you might be actually just refreshing a whole lot of hardware, depending on where you are in your business, what situation you're at. Before we start though, there's a couple of poll questions throughout the presentation that we would like to ask to try and understand a little bit about where you in the audience are at the moment in your transformation journey. So if we can pop up the first poll question, that would be great, please, Desi.
Yeah, the first poll. So our first polling question is, at what stage are you at on your cloud strategy? So we have a couple of options here. We have the desire but not sure where to start, just planning at this stage, underway but it's been a bumpy ride, or delivered in some part, though not what we had hoped for. So please submit your response. So it looks like some of you have responded. So those of you who have not yet responded, go ahead and submit your responses now. And we will close the poll in a few moments. Awesome. We're now closing the poll. Let me share the results with everyone. So it looks like we have the majority that choose we have the desire but not sure where to start. Let me share the results with you.
Okay. Good. All right, that's great. That gives me a bit of a feel for where we need to pitch this. So that's great. Thanks very much for that poll. Thanks, Eddie. So in the world today, we've got so many, I can't see the slide, sorry. So in today's technology-based world, and especially in the last 18 months, as we've been going through multiple lockdowns and pandemic and working from home, we have a lot of technology. So as a leader in IT, if you are in your business, or you're actually a business person, if you're a C-level person, doesn't matter where you are in the organization, there's a lot of technology out there at the moment. There's a lot of acronyms out at the moment. We in the IT industry, we love our acronyms. And so therefore it can be quite confusing as to what path you go down with your technology, because they have different effects on your organization. They have a different effect on the financial cash flow of your business, and also on the people that are working for you as well, and how they actually interact with the systems. Not to mention not to forget your customers as well. So your key customers. So what are some of the choices? And so I've just put a bit of a smattering of the few that sort of I've come across and you may have heard over time. So private cloud versus public cloud. Okay, do you actually host something yourself where only you can see it, only you can touch it, or do you go more for like a public cloud environment? Most companies seem to be going down a hybrid path. So they may still want to retain a little bit of their data or their information on premise. They might want to sort of put it in cloud, and they might have some subscription-based service as well. So Office 365 is obviously the one subscription service that a lot of people will have these days, but they may have other clouds. Maybe they have a payroll system that's in the cloud as well. We'll go over what SaaS, PaaS, and IaaS means, software as a service platform, infrastructure, all those types of things. We'll go through that in the next following slides as well. Robotics, RPA, you may have heard of those things. So RPA, robotic process automation, you may have heard about that. The good thing about robotics, and that's where robots, or bots as we call them in the industry, are doing a lot of the mundane tippy-tapping work on your systems. Doesn't matter what system it is, they can actually learn the transactions that you flow through. Especially good for organizations who have a high amount of data come in, or there is a chance of transposition errors by people keying things into their system as well. And what I like about the world of RPA is it is a very low cost of entry. It doesn't have to be very high. You don't have to be a large multi-corporate, multinational corporation in order to invest in those types of technologies. Then you have the machine learning, where the bots are actually learning your transactions, learning your environment to improve themselves and to be able to get through the transactions better. Internet of Things, big data. You would have heard of most of these things, artificial intelligence. Obviously, analytics is pretty hot at the moment as well, trying to work out how your business is performing. So these are a lot of the technology-based solutions that are out there at the moment. Next slide, please, Desi. And as we're going through a lot of changes, and again, fortunately for those of us down here in Australia, especially as we start to open up, but in the last 18 months, businesses need new traits to embrace this new world of technology. Chances are you may end up with people who are working back in the office part-time and partly at home as well. You may decide that because you went through a bad time through the pandemic, you need to maybe slash some costs or invest in some technology to see you through the future. So when I'm talking to other businesses and I'm seeing other businesses, I'm sort of understanding that we really need some new traits to help move forward, right? Then there's no doubt the biggest thing that we needed in the last 18 months was resiliency, right? Resiliency personally and resiliency in our business as well, because we never quite know what's around the corner. I'm sure couple of years ago, if any of us had talked about the thought of a pandemic, a global pandemic hitting us, we would have thought, well, maybe that's not likely to happen. We don't know these things. So we don't know what's actually around the corner. So businesses need to be a little bit more resilient in the face of these changes that are coming up. Need to also start removing some of the bottlenecks that hamper change. I see some businesses make it very difficult in order to enable change. And what we really need to do is we need to be a little bit more nimble, is the word that I call it. So we often hear about companies who say themselves, oh, we are an agile business, we embrace agile, but are they really that agile? If I had to take a decision to their board members, would they actually be agile and nimble in being able to turn around an approval for, say, an investment of technology or some change in their system? So we need to move pretty quickly. I'm sure we all experienced that last year when we all of a sudden had to move, excuse me, our employees from working in offices to working at home. And it wasn't just merely moving the people to the physical location. We had to get technology there. We had to do backups of data. We had to do connections of all of our systems. So we have to be very nimble because we never quite know what's around the corner again. Flexible working arrangements will be here to stay, most likely. It's hard to tell. It's still early days, of course. We see a lot around employees at the moment and how their attitudes have changed considerably over in the pandemic. The great mass resignations in the US and everything like that. How much of that is real and how much of that is hype in the media? I'm not entirely sure, but maybe people have a different outlook on life. So therefore, we need to not hamper our employees in doing their job, but give them the tools that make them grow, essentially, make them feel a little bit better about themselves, where they're going. And obviously, when you're fronting up the boss and the budgets come out, we often quite have to do much more with less these days. Next slide, please. So there's various models that will actually meet your needs when it comes to this. And again, it might be something that you slowly grow into. It might be a large transformation that you do straight away. It depends on the appetite and the speed at which you want to operate your project, your transformation project. You might want to just do a piecemeal, depending on your organization. And as I said, depends on the cash flow that you've got at the moment and where your desires are to get ahead of the game. So on the left-hand side, we've got the traditional models, and obviously a lot of companies have sat in the on-premise scenario before. So we've bought servers, we've put the servers into our server room, we've had our IT technical people looking after those servers, we've put the applications on there. Everything's pretty much been on-premise. But with the advent of cloud, we're starting to move slowly away from those traditional models of on-premise, co-location, managed, and even maybe at sometimes where it's totally outsourced, where the business actually may be able to retain a little bit more control. And we start to see companies moving and have moved successfully. And of course, quite often there is a bit of a bumpy road on the way, but sometimes that can't be avoided, to some of these cloud models. So, whether you go full software as a service or you just want some infrastructure as a service, each of those particular models should be able to suit the needs of your organization. Let's talk a little bit about software as a service for the moment. So to explain that a little bit more, it's like having a subscription to a service. So like I said before, you've got Office 365, for example. You might even have, your organization might use Xero or something like that. You're actually subscribing to the service it's in the cloud. Or you might have a bit of a hybrid, as I mentioned before. You might still maintain control of some of your own systems, especially some of your legacy systems that were built and designed just for you. But if you actually want to move them to the cloud, well, then you can definitely do that. You can do that under the platform as a service offering. So you don't actually have to pick one particular model. You can actually have a choice of two or even maybe three of them. Companies tend to like software as a service for a lot of their administrative operations, for example, finance and HR. And even payroll as well. So they can be going to organizations such as, maybe ADP or something like that to run their payroll. From a ERP point of view, your finance, your HR, your logistics, supply chain, or even your CRM, you could be going to Salesforce or SAP or Oracle, MIB. All these organizations now offer a software as a service. And there is a bit of a trend at the moment where a lot of these organizations are starting to maybe only offer certain software under that model, under that software as a service. Their next generation of software doesn't seem to be capable of actually providing an on-premise solution. So they're embracing it big time. So in some instances, you may not have a choice. I just want to bring Vincent into this discussion as well, because IT Connections are obviously heavily invested in a lot of these cloud models, to maybe say a few words about, from a technical point of view, around some of these models and how they may relate to you.
Thanks, Greg. Yeah, just wanted to add a few more points that are relevant to this particular slide. So we see customers that have adopted one or more of these different models, and certainly through time, we have helped customers transition from the more traditional models to the cloud models. So for example, we have still a number of organizations which have got specific legacy applications where the database or the application actually needs to run on a server. And so for many of those businesses, they're still running an on-premise server. So the server itself is housed within the office building. For some customers, we've helped them move that physical server into co-location or managed host. So that means the application itself is still running on a server at the database as well, but that server is no longer physically housed within the office building. It's moved into a data center. So that's kind of, a first step into this journey to the cloud model. We've also helped some customers move their systems and databases from an on-premise server into an IaaS model, for example, Microsoft Azure or Amazon Web Services. So the application and the database is actually running in the cloud using the IaaS models. And then just to support what Greg was saying, people that are using Xero, that's an example of a SaaS system. I think even just recruiting through Seek, you could sort of say that Seek is also a SaaS type solution. Everything is in the cloud. And I think, I think more and more applications are going that way. And I think, Greg, you're going to touch on some of the issues, or not issues, but things to consider when you're adopting these sorts of things, which is around data sovereignty, security, privacy of data, etc.
Yep, exactly.
Yeah, but certainly with our customers, IT Connection is, we have sort of seen our customers transition through the traditional models to the cloud models, and we can certainly assist in that journey. So thanks, Greg. Was there anything else you want me to add, or
No, that's fine. That's fine. It's you know, I sort of see it as it's an a la carte menu of choice these days when it comes to those types of services. Now the question is, what suits your business? So, you know, what is the next part of the presentation I usually call is what's not on the glossy brochure. What are some of the things that need to catch you out? And it's not to put a negative connotation to any of this. It's what are the things that can actually bite you? What are some of the things that you need to consider? So if we jump to the next slide, please. And we'll bring up another poll question while we're doing that as well.
Thanks, Greg. Thanks, Vincent. I'll be launching the second poll. Yep, so the next poll, we have a question here. What is your biggest concern over a cloud enablement strategy? And we have some options here: potential cost to implement and operate, security and data storage, the complexity of our current environment, and payback. So please go ahead and submit your response. Yep, I can see some responses here. Awesome. So we're now closing the poll, and let me share the results with everyone. Over to you, Greg.
Okay, interesting. Yep, cost to implement and security. Security always comes at the top of it. All right, so let's now. So this slide that's in front of you at the moment is a bit of an explanation of what we just spoke about, and we've put a few examples in there. I'm sure we'll be sharing the slides with you later on, so you can actually see these examples. Again, don't choose a model because you think that's the right thing to do. Go with what your strategy is, go with what your requirements are, and also be aware of the security implications. Obviously, it's quite important because it was one of the most popular ones, and it normally is. People don't mind the connotation or the idea of moving to cloud, but they're a bit concerned about their data and their privacy and the security. So if we go over to the next slide, thanks. So you like a bit of a challenge. You may want a bit of a challenge. You want to succeed in whatever you want to do. You don't want to hear about all those horror stories of, you know, failed implementations and failed transformations. You want to proceed. Then what do you do? Next slide, please. Okay. So as I said, here are a few what I would call opportunities, things you need to look out for when you're doing this. Otherwise, you will get a cost overrun. Okay, if you don't keep your eye on the prize, you will get a cost overrun. And I see too many businesses who make a decision that they want to go to product A. They do that, they sign up, but they don't consider some of the implications that I'm about to talk about. So what I want to do is just raise it to your attention, and then we'll go into what I would call the human side of transformation. So what's going to happen in your organization when you do these things. So if you start to move from a fully on-premise world and you start to go with software as a service or platform as a service, but for the most part of this presentation, I usually focus on software as a service because that seems to be where the majority of companies are going these days. There is going to be a shift in the relationship between the customer and the provider. So if you are already using software from a provider and then you decide to go to their cloud-based solution, then obviously the relationship will change. Some of the responsibilities will move to them, especially some of the basic IT infrastructure responsibilities. At the same time, you need to change your support model. Too many companies I see still operate under the old traditional support models, not taking into account that they've actually now moved to a cloud environment, in which case then the onus is a lot more on the provider to ensure the software is up and running, that you've got at least say 99.96% availability of the software, that they turn around your calls in an appropriate time, and that you be compensated if there are actually problems. You don't need to worry about that so much when you're running your on-premise, because you're in charge of your own destiny. So definitely the relationship will change. So I would suggest if you start to do that, really have a look at the responsibilities, do a proper RACI on responsibilities, aware of who is doing what, and actually have a look at what your support model is. And you may actually have to change your support model, especially if you're a business that's got, say, level 1, 2, and 3 support in your organization. Who's doing what, where, and when, who's responsible for everything. Licensing changes a lot for those of you that are, any of you that are in there or who are from any of the finance teams. You're going to be moving from most likely a CapEx model to an OpEx model, so operating. So you're not going to be buying the software and then just paying a maintenance fee after that. You will be subscribing. And for most organizations, I would assume that would be an ongoing operational expense. You may be able to capitalize your project when you first do it and take advantage of that and create that asset. But after that, it becomes operational expense through the subscription software. So of course, your operational expense will go up, but you won't be rebuying hardware every few years, or investing more into infrastructure and things like that. So it is a little bit of a shift in the way that your cash flows operate in your business. So your CFO really needs to be made aware of that. The contract that you have obviously changes from a subscription-based piece of software to normally the old-fashioned shrink wrap piece of software. And I would definitely suggest, as I said before, that you think about some service level agreements. So look at the service level agreements the provider is willing to offer. Make sure that you are aware of what they are, what they need to be held accountable to as well. Most companies will actually produce that on their attach it to their contract, or actually put it on their website, but read that carefully so that you're quite aware about what the service level agreements are and what their turnaround times are as well. Next slide, thanks. It's one thing to go to a hybrid environment, as I said before, where you may have a couple of cloud solutions, and you may still have some legacy data or legacy applications on premise. What you need to watch out for is the integration of those solutions. So you need to make sure that you've done your homework beforehand. And usually I would suggest that the first part that you start on any journey is some basic architecture that you need to do. You don't need a full-blown, depending on your organization, of course, if you don't need necessarily a full-blown enterprise architecture model, but at least you need some base architecture to actually determine where your data is, where your systems are, and what talks to what. So what applications talk to what applications. So when you're moving to cloud and you're moving to hybrid and you're moving to away from your on-premise environment, there becomes a greater need to rely on the integration between those. So you've got to make sure that those systems can actually talk together. You've also got to make sure that those systems can talk to each other in the right order. So there's no use the finance system wanting information from the HR system if the HR system is talking a day after the transactions have actually occurred. It needs to be timely, not the other way around. So we need, if you're putting transactions in a HR system or in a logistics system, a CRM system, you need to make sure that the order of events of your integration makes sense so that the transactions arrive back in your general ledger properly. And you need to address any legacy interfaces. Interfaces over time tend to get a little bit out of control. So you may have some proper, interfaces to all your systems, or you may have just downloads of CSV files or text files, and you upload that. Here is a great opportunity for you to invest in some proper integration and actually get rid of a lot of that old clutter that you may have in your legacy environment. Now, if you've already done that homework, fantastic. But just one thing to watch out for is old interfaces can sometimes clash with the new interfaces, especially to those cloud environments. and have a look at the applications that you've got at the moment that you could retire. If you haven't had a refresh of your application portfolio for a number of years, and then all of a sudden you start to think, well, maybe we should be going to some type of software as a service because we need to upgrade these other applications. It could be that you could turn off 3, 4, maybe even 5 applications and roll it into the one application. And that's obviously going to help you with your licensing, with your backups, with your support moving forward. It's also going to make it a little bit easier for your staff that work for you because they don't have to use so many systems. Everything's integrated into one of them. Think about your testing as well. Put a lot of effort into that, because if you do go with, say, a software as a service or some type of service offering, usually in the contracts, the client, because they don't do major upgrades anymore, they do incremental patches. So they slowly bring in new information, new configuration as time goes on. And of course, they have security patches and so forth. And so therefore, you may have maybe quarterly updates. You may have monthly updates, depending on the provider at the time. So be aware that they will change the landscape from time to time with new functionality. One, you want to be able to test that to make sure it doesn't break anything that you've got. Secondly, you need to be aware of what functionality is coming down the path, because it might be something that you want, something that you can take advantage of. So that way, it is an ever-changing landscape, but at least you've got a little bit of control. I mentioned very much at the very start of the application around automation. So there's a lot of automation tools out there. You can use those automation tools to do your testing as well, if you don't want your people to be sitting down and doing manual test scripts as well. So bring the bots in, get them to do the testing, whether it be quarterly or monthly. They operate in the background and they'll tell you if something's going to break in the new world, providing you're being given access to the new system, say a month before it actually goes live. So testing is an important part as well. Next slide, please. Downstream systems. So what I'm talking about downstream systems is if you decide to, say, put your finance system or your HR system up in the cloud, you may have a whole lot of other systems that are on premise that may require that information. That's called a downstream system, because it's relying information from up above to come down and populate fields in other software that you may have. So if I go back to what I said before around architecture, make sure you know where your true source of data is. A few companies that come to mind, of ones that I've worked with before, didn't realize until they did this exercise that they had employee data in 2 systems. So yes, they had their core on-premise HR system, but they also had a whole lot of other databases that were hanging off the back of that, which was collecting the same information, and people were able to edit that information. So that's a no-no. Where is your true source of data? Which system does it reside in? And if it's actually giving that information to other systems, make sure those systems are locked down so you can't change it. And I have a bit of a saying, which is when your SaaS sneezes, your other systems catch a cold. So if there is a problem at the top, or if there is a problem with your core ERP system or your core systems, then that can have a detrimental effect to these downstream systems. So just do a little bit of homework on where your actual data is. Make sure that the business is ready. So when I say ready, I don't mean technically ready. Most of these new generation cloud platforms, they work. I mean, they essentially work. They can't afford not to work. They do. Most companies that provide these types of services use a model company approach. So they will have a model of their software that is suitable for retailers, or for manufacturing environments, or even not-for-profit organizations. And what they do is they give you access to that particular model, they put that in for you, and away you go. Chances are most of the functionality that's within those models will actually work for you, but is your business ready to it? Have you focused on your users? Have they been included, and have they been taken on the journey, so to speak, to this transformation? So is your business ready to turn it on? Technically, it may be, but maybe some of your team may not be. That's where change management comes into it. So ensure a really good change management process, especially if it's a large project. It's unfortunately when projects run over time, it's the first thing that gets cut in the budget is change management, unfortunately. But it really is important because you need to make sure that the business is ready to actually take it on. And for anyone who's technical in the audience, have a think about your single sign-on. So it is a bit of a challenge getting single sign-on working, especially when you've got multiple cloud solutions out there, trying to get them all to harmonize as one so that you users, your team, even yourself, only really have to put in your credentials once. That can be a bit of a challenge for companies. I think it's getting better over time. Definitely when I started moving companies to cloud, which was in around 2010, 2011, that's when we started talking about the word cloud a lot. It was definitely a big challenge. I think it's probably a little bit easier now, but just be aware of it, please. Next slide, thanks. So we go above just the service offerings that are out there and some of the homework that you would need to do. But I'm talking here more around the overall project itself. And I'm probably not saying anything that you would find unusual or you haven't come across before. I'm sure we've all had our fair share of successful and not so successful projects. And so therefore, these are just some of the things that I find in my journeys that I've done so far, where companies sort of trip over themselves a little bit when it comes to these. Remember, sometimes it's not about the technology, it's about how you've put it in and in the change management that has been either included or in some cases not included. Deviation from the scope, classic. Scope creep can easily creep into, make its way into our project. So set your direction, lock it in, and away you go. If there's anything that comes up from time to time, put it in the parking lot, as I say, and then address it at another time. Analysis paralysis, we do this all the time. We look too deeply into the deep root problems and the issues, and we analyze the hell out of some of our projects. Sometimes I find that companies look too deeply, especially when they're doing a transformation project. They look too deeply into it. They want to analyze everything, and therefore what that does is it clouds their judgment. And what I'm talking about, the analysis that they do, is that they make time and motion studies. What are their people doing in this current systems? They focus a lot on the past and they're not focusing on the future, and they tend to get themselves in a little bit of a bind. Through a proper project management approach, you can be successful at this. There are a lot of moving parts, but if you're aware of what those moving parts are, you can address them much quickly. Don't overanalyze the situation. I mentioned change management before. It's usually the discretionary spend, unfortunately, in projects. If you're going to go through a transformation to be successful, please don't cut that. Make sure there is some element of change management. Make sure you've actually got someone there who can actually give you some advice as well, as to what is the right way to do things and how your team will react to that as well. And of course, you have typical communication overload or breakdown in, sometimes you can over communicate these change. People get concerned, they get a little bit worried. And a lot of companies don't celebrate the wins. So you might do a staged approach, you might do a staged rollout. Celebrate the wins. Doesn't matter how small or big they are. Celebrate the wins. Make the team feel that they're actually getting somewhere. Doesn't have to be a large celebration or anything like that. It can be a morning tea or a break or a few hours off, whatever it is that suits your particular organization. Not celebrating the wins makes it more of a chore. And when it becomes a chore, people tend to take their eye off the game. Next slide, thanks. So be prepared when it comes to these projects. Don't be overawed from it. Lots of companies have gone through this change. A lot of companies have been able to maintain their cost base. It is a change to the way that they do, that they operate their IT, and I understand that. But it doesn't mean that you all of a sudden, sack all your IT people or anything like that. There's new roles, and I'll mention that in a few slides time. There's new roles that people can take on, which actually may enhance their career. So don't get too caught up in the tech. As I said, mostly the tech will work. It's how you put it in that's the thing you need to focus on the most. Focus on where your data is. If your data is being kept in old databases or old spreadsheets, maybe now's the time, especially with the advent of a lot of cybersecurity, a lot of hacks that are going on. Where is your actual data and is it secure? Chances are it could be, and I'm not saying it is, but it could be more safer in a cloud environment than in your own on-premise one, because maybe you don't have the budget to spend on a lot of the firewalls that these large organizations like Microsoft and SAP and Google have to actually maintain your data. The question there is you've got to make sure you know where it is. So if you're under privacy laws, if you need it to be, say, in Victoria, you need to ensure that your data actually resides in Victoria. Do a process redesign. So go through your basic business processes and redesign those that are a little bit old, a little bit manual as well. Maybe it's a good opportunity to get rid of some of those. Architecture, and more architecture. Please have a think about doing architecture. Doesn't have to be overkill, doesn't have to be pages and pages of pretty drawings or anything like that. Just a base architecture, just so you know what you've got in your portfolio, where your data is, where your integration points are, and where you're going to be in the future. And if you do your 2B properly, then that gives you a good roadmap to get to where you need to be. And don't do everything at once. It's not, how do you eat an elephant, one chunk at a time type thing. Focus on the customer experience, especially if your system is being put out to your customers as well. Have a think about what they would like to see, how they would like the screens to look. Under a software as a service offering, you don't get a lot of opportunities around how your screens are going to look. So the sooner you can maybe bring in some of your key customers or employees to see it, the better off the change management is going to be. And as I said before, you may want to consider doing some RPA afterwards, some automation afterwards to get rid of some of that grunt work. I can't see the last point, sorry, Desi. Oh, okay, yep. And do something innovative as well. Sorry, I just couldn't quite see that on my screen. Do something innovative as well. So that's the other buzzword that's sort of flying around at the moment is innovation. So don't just do a technical upgrade. Don't just do a technical move. Do something that's innovative. If you have a business process that you think is so awful, so bad, focus on that. And then hopefully those people that are holding the money to invest, if you can actually get rid of a lot of those roadblocks, or you can get rid of a lot of those old processes and do something innovative, whether it's using Internet of Things or better interfaces, or even consolidating a lot of your data and having reporting tools published online, something innovative, the stakeholders will see that you've actually delivered something because it affects them. You know that the work has been going on because you've been involved in the project, but some of it's under the cover sometimes, some of it's technical and under the cover. If you bring something to your senior stakeholders that says, you know what, this problem that we've always had, we're actually going to solve it through this, and this is what it's going to look like, then that's going to make the project look so much more successful than if it was just a technical program. Next slide, thanks. So I'll talk a little bit about the human side of transformation because I can't help it. I need to do this because I've been involved in so many moves to cloud that I quite often see the people are left behind. I have actually had conversations with people who've come into my office when I used to work for businesses, worried that they were going to lose their job over these types of transformation. They feel that maybe they're dinosaurs and they're going to be extinct very soon. But that is never the case, not in the experience that I've had. All right, it is an opportunity for people to learn new technologies, to operate under a different landscape. And if you start to bring that innovation angle into it, which I just spoke about, all of a sudden it piques their interest and they get more involved than they have before. And they're not concerned that maybe their job is going to slightly change. This could be business people, could be technical people. Doesn't matter. We all sometimes get a little bit nervous when change is about to happen because we don't know how it's going to affect us individually. But I can tell you from previous experience, some of your team will actually have new skills to learn. They'll have new systems. They'll have new technology that they'll be able to work with. And they can actually then start to see the benefit of actually being involved in this transformation. If they're a technical based person, they'll have a new platform to support as well, or maybe they're a super user who's working in your organization and they're very good at business systems. They can put their hand up and become a super user in your system around it. And obviously these systems are around for quite a long time. And they're going to find that there's new ways of actually delivering change. So please, when you're actually about to consider this change, consider the employees, the people that are going to be using this system. How will they feel about this change? Bring them on board, and then you'll have a more successful transformation. Next slide, thanks. Some may not make the journey, okay? And I have seen this as well. Some refuse to accept that there's that new world that's coming. They want to live, they want to do what they've been doing for the last 20 years, and they don't want to hear it. They've got their head in the sand. So some of them may not make the journey, but for most of them that do, on the next slide, thanks. But those that do, it's new technology that they're being involved in and that they're learning. And so they're going to feel a little bit better at that, so about themselves. We're trying to encourage them to get out of their comfort zone, the way that they've been doing things in the past, and start delivering real value. Sometimes when I've put in some automation in some companies, people straight away think, oh my God, the robots are going to take over my role. But when you actually bring them into the project and you start to show them what the bots can do, for example, or what some of the automation can do, and then you actually run them through the process and they start to use it and they start to understand it, they start to shift away from that, oh my job's gone, to, oh, okay, now I understand it. I can actually use this to improve my output. I can get this to do some of the jobs that I don't particularly like to do. And then they start thinking of other ideas and other ways that they can actually automate their processes. Take them on the journey and they'll come over much easier, and they will embrace it. They will actually start thinking of new ways of doing things. From them, it refreshes their career as well, because all of a sudden they're learning something new. They're getting involved in something they haven't done before. And everybody wants to be part of a successful project or a successful transformation. So take them on the journey. Most businesses that I've worked in or for have usually done that through suggestions that I've made of actually bringing them in and seeking ideas from the people that use it as well. Remember, it's not always about the tech, it's also about the business and how the business reacts to these things. Next slide, thanks. So I usually like to end my presentations with a quote, and I've been using this one for quite a few years and people quite like it. When digital transformation is done right, it's like a caterpillar turning into a butterfly. Well, so they say. But when it's done wrong, all you really do is end up with a really fast caterpillar. And that's the end of my presentation. I hope that there's something in there that you can take away. And I believe that we've got a poll question to end up this session before we move to Q&A. Over to you, Desi.
Yep, thank you so much, Greg. So we're coming to the third and final polling question. Let me launch the poll. So the question of the third poll: if cloud is part of your strategic intent, what horizon are you working towards? So the options are the next 12 months, the next 2 to 3 years, or no plan. So please submit your responses. I can see some of you have responded. We will close the poll in a few moments. Yeah, I can see more responses. Perfect. So we're now closing the poll, and let me share the results with you. So over to you, Greg.
Okay, interesting. Thank you. All right. Well, if you're planning in the next 12 months, hope you've done some good plans as well. Interesting that 43% said that they can't judge it. Be interesting to talk to those people about, what plans that they think they need to put in place. Anyway, that's the end of this presentation. We'll now move to, I think this is the next slide, just a Q&A, I believe, Desi?
Yes.
Yes.
So thank you again. We're now going to begin answering the questions submitted during today's presentation. So again, you can submit your questions through the Q&A panel, or otherwise I would now unmute the attendees so you're allowed to talk. Just a sec.
So if anyone's got any questions or comments or feedback, please put it in the chat or come off and talk on mic. More than happy to talk. We've still got 9 minutes left and for the scheduled time. Also worth noting that as part of the offering of this presentation, if you'd like a free consultation from myself, please let the organisers know and we can arrange a quick chat over Teams to talk about your organisation. There's no commitment on your side apart from maybe a half an hour or so chat over things just to do some brainstorming. No commitment there. Happy to talk about these things because I don't want to see if people are planning things over the next 12 months and they're still not sure about what their plan is. I'd love to be able to just throw a few ideas at people and just get some thoughts out there on things that you may not have considered before. So please communicate with OT Connections, and we'll make some time to meet with you either over Teams or we can come out to your organisation. Who knows? We're out there these days meeting people and talking to people. But is there any questions? Silence. No?
Any questions coming through on the chat?
No questions so far.
Give everyone a few more minutes.
Yep.
I must have answered everything in the presentation, Vincent.
So,
would you like to do a song or something like that now?
I could if you were, you'd like to do a duet perhaps.
Then we definitely everybody would be leaving the.
With some accompaniment.
I mean, it is a topic that it's a lot to take in, but going by the poll questions, people are thinking about it, people are considering it, but if you don't want to ask,
I was just going to say, Greg, maybe one question that might be of interest to our listeners is, if you make a plan, how long could it take to transform a business from one to another? In maybe just a few examples.
Yeah, I suppose if I don't know, maybe let's choose medium-sized businesses, I suppose. Most of the, say, transformations to some type of software as a service or uplift will take, obviously with the right planning, the correct planning, we'll probably take maybe 2 to 3 months to do that type of work. Depends on how many applications you're changing at the time and how many you're getting rid of and consolidating. But I mean, anywhere between 3 to 6 months, I wouldn't imagine, for a medium-sized business is probably enough, providing the planning is done beforehand. Without that proper planning and that architecture, then it could go forever. And you don't want it to turn into a 12-month or 2-year journey, because then your stakeholders are going to be a bit concerned about what you took on. I think also it's important, and I think it was the very first poll question, is that sometimes the costs can get blown out a lot and you need to understand the cost base that you're working with. So the subscription costs, the cost to implement as well, budget for it properly. And a lot of companies won't do it because of the cost. However, you need to really think of your horizon over the next 5 years of what you're going to be spending on maybe refreshing hardware, refreshing applications, or even failure rate of your legacy applications as well. You need to all take that into consideration. Too many companies just focus on the outlay and not the cost that it may be incurred by not doing it as well.
Thanks, Greg. do we have any other questions from today's attendees?
Yep, so far we don't have any questions. Is there anything that you, Greg, or Vincent would like to add before a wrap up?
Vincent,
Well,
I'll leave it with you.
yeah, well, firstly, just wanted to thank Greg for presenting today's webinar and demystifying the cloud for our listeners, and sharing your experience with the various cloud models, the challenges that you faced, and the important considerations of cost, of data and privacy, security, processes, and people as well. So as Greg's mentioned, for attendees of today's webinar, if you are considering cloud for your business or organization, Greg is offering a complimentary consultation, and that could really be beneficial in kickstarting your journey to the cloud. And so if it's of interest, please contact us at IT Connection and we'll definitely arrange an appointment with Greg. So thanks again, Greg, to presenting. I'd like to personally thank all of you on Zoom today for your attendance. And we have future events and webinars coming up, a whole program of events, and we hope to see you all again soon. Desi, would you like to make any further closing remarks?
Yep. Thanks, Vincent. So yeah, thank you so much, Greg and Vincent. And I would like to thank everyone for attending today's webinar, Demystifying the Cloud. Again, if you have any other questions, please contact info@itconnection.com. And once you leave today's webinar, you will receive a survey on the presentation, and we would appreciate if you would complete that and provide your feedback. So you will also receive a follow-up email within 24 to 48 hours with a link to view a recording of today's webinar. So again, on behalf of IT Connection and our presenters today, thank you for joining us and have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.